think we can get started. Hello, my name is Aline Villavicencio, and I'm the director of the Institute for Data Science and AI at the University of Exeter. And along with Mark Widiart from the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, we would like to welcome you to this rapid response panel on modeling climate change, an overview of the crisis and reconstruction plans in southern Brazil. So this is an event that is organized in collaboration with the Environment and Sustainability Institute, the Global Systems Institute, and the Joint Center for Excellence in Environmental Intelligence of the University of Exeter, and by the Met Office in the UK, and the National Center for Monitoring and Early Warning of Natural Disasters in Brazil. And I would like to introduce Carolina Brito from the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul, who will be introducing and moderating this panel. But before that, I would like to thank the panelists for having accepted to participate in this event in such a short notice, given that these devastating floods happened earlier in this month, and the relevances of discussions about how science can help us understand, model, predict, and respond to extreme events like these, and how to plan for living with our environments. And thank you, everybody, for joining in also to this event. So Carolina, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Aline and Marco, for the invitation to be the moderating of this panel, this important panel. So the goal of this first panel, because I think we are going to keep those discussions, I hope at least, the goal of this first panel is to discuss the global climate crisis with a focus on the floods in the Rio Grande do Sul, which have provoked an unprecedented humanitarian tragedy in our state. Almost the entire state of Rio Grande do Sul, an area which is larger than the UK, has recently been affected by massive floods. In just 2 weeks, the amount of rainfall was equivalent to what was typically expected to over 5 months. This immense volume of water caused several rivers to rise by several meters, resulting in floods across more than 85% of our state. Some cities have been completely submerged by this so-called tsunami of mud. There are over 300 deaths, 500,000 people displaced, and nearly 100,000 people in shelters. Future projections of climate change indicate that such extreme events are likely to increase in frequency and intensity. And it's important to note that Porto Alegre, the capital of our state, has a flood protection system that failed completely due to a lack of maintenance. So today we'll discuss in more detail what happened in Rio Grande do Sul, some aspects of the science of climate change, and ideas to mitigate and adapt to this problem, to this crisis, with 4 invited speakers. I will introduce them more in detail when I call each speaker, but I just want to announce them now. The first one will be José Marengo, the director of the National Center of Monitoring and Early Warning of Natural Disasters, CEMADEM, in Brazil. Robin Shelwick and Andrew Hartley, both members of the Met Office of UK, and Márcia Barbosa, who is full professor at the Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul. I just want to mention that that's supposed to be a short panel that aiming to be concluded in 1 hour. So each speaker will have between 10 and 12 minutes to speak, and I will ask the audience to ask questions, writing them. We'll be collecting the questions, and they will group them, and at the end of the panel, we'll ask to our panelists. So the first speaker, as I just mentioned, is José Marengo. He's director of the CEMADEM, as I just said, and he's member of several international panels, including the panel of the International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, and he's also member of the Brazilian Academy of Science and the World Academy of Science. He'll tell us now a little bit more details about the crisis in Rio Grande do Sul, outlining some factors like natural variability, humidity, and so on and so forth. So I will let you speak, José Marengo, please, if you can upload your presentation.
Okay. Carolina, aqui aparece uma mensagem que diz: o anfitrião desativou o compartilhamento da tela do participante.
Hi, sorry, you should be able to share properly now.
Okay,
There we go. Sorry about that.
that's okay. Thank you. Well, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Jose Marengo. I'm not a director. I'm the Research and Development General Coordinator. So I haven't been promoted to director yet. But I'm going to give a climatic hydrological overview of this rainfall and this disaster, which you see some of the pictures, for instance, down there. This is the city of Canoas in the first and the third picture, and then the other is the city of Porto Alegre. I mean, this is the first time I see a big city flooded. Usually in the previous disasters, you see small towns or small cities, but this is the time we have all of these impacts in a bigger city, in a capital, even with the airport and the bus station and many, many strategic places closed because of the rainfall. This tendency, people who work in climate variability in South America, we know since the third assessment report in 2007 that rainfall in southeastern South America is increasing. When I say southeastern South America, includes southern Brazil, northern Argentina, Uruguay. And we have from 1951 to 2018, we have this tendency for rainfall extremes, two indices for rainfall extremes. And if you notice in the southern part of Brazil, we have this green color, meaning that the rainfall extremes are becoming more extreme and more abundant. And this is the same tendency we see in the climate projections for the future. So basically what we see now is part of a tendency in increasing rainfall extremes. Like I said, it has been well documented for decades. Since we work with disaster here is a combination of a hazard, that in this case is the heavy rainfall, vulnerability, and exposure. So a rainfall is not a disaster. The disaster is triggered by rainfall and affects particularly vulnerable people and exposure people. So we have the best modeling for hazards, but those models cannot give us the vulnerability and exposure because those are basically part of political and environmental policies and public policies regarding housing, for instance. So the disaster is a combination of those three. The rainfall is not a disaster. The rainfall extreme is the hazard that triggers a disaster. And we see climate variability and climate change may be affecting the rainfall, the extreme rainfall, but differently. The rainfall, the trigger disaster has to do a lot with human activity. And last year, in 2023, in September 2023, we have a similar disaster, but it was affecting only the Taquari River Valley. It was in September, 53 people died, and we have some days with rainfall above 100 millimeters. You see, so less than 1 year ago, this region was destroyed, and you see some of the pictures in there. And this region didn't have the time to recover when we have this disaster in May. So we see, for instance, disaster took people by surprise. Most of the Brazilian municipalities are not well prepared for climatic extremes. You see, for instance, the picture before the rainfall, the city of Porto Alegre, the Guaíba Lake, and then after the rainfall, you see the floods in light blue colors. And 401 or 497 cities in Rio Grande do Sul were affected. So far, the number of deaths is 154 until 4 days ago. So I'm not sure exactly the number now. I think what I saw, it was 161. We have many people missing. So what happened? From April 26 to 11 of May, we have more than 300 millimeters of rainfall. If you see the rainfall anomalies are well concentrated in the cities of Rio Grande do Sul and the state of Santa Catarina. So it was a lot of rainfall, much a lot of rainfall. It's almost 300 millimeters above normal in that particular region. And that was because at the same time, I have a figure that will show the meteorological cause. But what we have in here, is the rainfall in 3 stations, in Caxias do Sul, Santa Maria, and Porto Alegre, from 1961 to 2024. You see, for instance, in Caxias do Sul, 45 millimeters in one day, and 33.5 in Santa Maria, and 24.8, which are the largest since the beginning of the record. And the figure in the middle with these blue bars, we have Santa Maria, for instance, in those particular days between April 26 and May the 5th, we have 533 millimeters, when the average monthly average is 151. So in less than 1 week, we have almost 400% of rainfall above normal. And that was the same case in other cities like Caxias do Sul, in Porto Alegre, in Paso Fundo, and in Pelotas. So these are the rainfall detected by the CEMADEN network. The first one is the period, is one period, and the other is a later period. You see, for instance, in the red color from the different pluviometers CEMADEN has, it is more than 100 millimeters in our that period. We have regions with 200 and some of them with 300 and 400. That particular region covers the Guaíba Lake Basin. We have the Taquari, Rio das Santas, Rio dos Sinos, and others river basins. So there was raining a lot, and this rainfall at the end comes into the Lake Guaíba, and the Lake Guaíba actually was suffering of overflow. And we have another period of rainfall, May 10 to 12, where most of the rainfall was concentrated in the northeastern part of the state. So if we have the accumulated rainfall in two cities, in Lajeado, Rio Grande do Sul, the Bacia de Taquari, and Santa Maria in the Bacia of the Rio Yacuí. The bar shows the daily rainfall, and the blue line shows the accumulated rainfall. So the accumulated rainfall in Lajeado went beyond 500 millimeters, and the same case as Santa Maria. And the meteorological situation was what? A warm tropical North Atlantic, a high pressure system that was affecting the Atlantic and then the central West Brazil, which was high pressure, was a stability, dry conditions, warm conditions, basically a hot air bubble over that region. And that hot air bubble, it was like a wall. Well, the cold fronts from the south couldn't move to the north. So the cold fronts became stationary over the states of Rio Grande do Sul and Santa Catarina in southern Brazil, which is the warm because of this cold warm air bubble, and the cold front because of the cold air coming from the south. So we have a major situation. If you see the satellite picture, we have the moisture coming from the Atlantic and crossing the Amazon. And then we have the cold air coming from the south, and then the frontal region stationary over the state of Rio Grande do Sul, releasing a lot of rainfall in a few days. And we have this data from several rivers, but we just put some from the Uruguay River Basin. And in all of them, you see the peak overflow well above the overflow level and 5 meters above the climatology. And in terms of the forecast, like I said, the weather forecasts were correct because the weather forecasts were issued by the meteorological institution saying that rainfall, we are going to have intense rainfall. Of course, there is a limitation in the weather forecast because sometimes it rains more than expected according to the model, but this is a sequence of that. CEMADEN works with modeling and the issue of alerts of disaster risk. So basically we work with early warning systems. What happened? In April 28, the weather forecasts were showing intense rainfall for Rio Grande do Sul in the upcoming days. On April 21, CEMADEN started issuing the alerts of high and very high risk of geological and hydrological disasters. On April 30, the worsening of the situation, CEMADEN informed of the civil defense of what's going to happen, so the civil defense took care of this, passing the alerts to the population. On May 2, we have the overflow of the Guaíba Lake starting, and on May 5th, we have the peak of overflow in the Guaíba Lake flooding the city of Porto Alegre. And the maps you see in there, you see muito alto, which is very high, and alto, which is high, and yellow, which is moderate. This is a forecast of risk, hydrological risk, made for in April, with May 1, valid for May 2, 3, and 4. And as you see, the region affected by the floods are in red, and by geological, which is the landslides, is there. So basically, the situation that happened in May 2, 3, and 4 in terms of disaster was predicted by CEMADEN, and the civil defense was informed. And in terms of what could happen in the future, I show in the present, we have the tendency for more rainfall in the states of Rio Grande do Sul and southern Brazil. The future shows similar behavior. This is for projections from the potential impacts of floods, the first line, and the second line shows the potential of impacts of landslides. This is from the helix models, the helix runs. And if we see the darker color, the red darker color shows for the states on Rio Grande do Sul and the state in southeastern Brazil, the red color, the darkest one, which means that this region in the future, if with rainfall increases, actually are become really potential for impacts for floods and landslides is going to increase a lot. And two states comes as the most important affected, which is Santa Catarina and Rio Grande do Sul. So I've said facts because there is no conclusion yet. I mean, the disaster is not over. So just to finish, the state of Rio Grande do Sul has been affected by heavy rainfall, triggering floods. The meteorological causes were intense flow from humidity from the Amazon. Because of the high pressure in West Central Brazil, we have a blocking of the cold fronts, and the cold fronts remain stationary, can generate large bodies of rainfall since May 1st. The changes in the atmospheric circulation are associated with the El Niño phenomenon, which is still going on in South America. I mean, it's becoming weaker, but it's still there. The Taquari, Cai, Docinos, and Antas River have increased their levels by several meters, flooding cities and impacting population, and this generates a wave with the floods of more than 5 meters into Lake Guaíba, and this is considered the worst disaster, climatic-related disasters, exceeding even the previous record in 1941, September 1941. And then, as observed, there is a trend for increasing rainfall in southern Brazil, which is associated with global warming. However, we can state the disaster caused as a consequence of human activity. So, I mean, we have to see actually if this intense rainfall has the signal of anthropogenic climate change. Perhaps Rob will show that. But so far, what we can say about the disaster, not about the rainfall, about the disasters caused by intense rain are consequences from human activities. Constructions in areas of risk flooding, which were flooded in 2023 September, were flooded again in May 24. And the problem was a larger number of fatalities. Hydraulic structures to protect the city of Porto Alegre did not withstand the flood levels and broke. Those hydraulic structures were built after the disaster in 1941, and for sure there is a lack of maintenance of this flood case. There was suggested that in the 70s, when these were built, nobody thought about climate change and nobody thought that perhaps rainfall will be increasing in 50 years. And the lack of maintenance of the floodgates, the city of Porto Alegre lacks of resilience in the face of climate extremes, as detected in 2024. It means that this city and many other cities may not be prepared for climate extremes similar to what happened in 2024. So climate change could increase the disaster risk scenario in urban areas. So like I say, the disaster has a lot of things having to do with public policies. And like I said, there is something we cannot model about public policies or attitudes from the governors or the mayors on the councils. So this is an announced disaster. Unfortunately, the information were there, the forecasts were there, the tendency of rainfall increase were there, but sometimes the government don't listen to science. And we hope that this situation makes the government to start believing in science again. Well, with this finished, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, José Marinho, for this very nice presentation, very sad situation. Okay, so let me call our second panelist, Robin Chadwick, who is member of the Met Office, and his research focuses on the global water cycle related to climate change and variability. And in particular, today he will present us some nice results that he has been studying, has been publishing very recently about how precipitation patterns are changing in the world, and he'll focus on the results for Brazil. And also he'll mention some attribution between the relation between this event that happens in the Rio Grande do Sul and the relationship with the climate change. So please, Rob, if you can upload your presentation and for us.
Thanks, Carolina. Lola, I think you need to give me permission to start my video again.
Okay, okay. So I think Emily needs to do that. I can myself. Let me see. Emily, could you help us here?
Yeah, I think I've just enabled it. I'll try it now.
Okay.
Yeah, there I am.
Okay, we can see you now.
Thank you. Okay, can you see that okay, Carolina?
Yes, we can. Perfectly.
Great.
Go ahead.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name's Rob Chadwick. I work for the UK Met Office and also the University of Exeter. So Marengo has already put this event in the context of climate change to some extent, so I'm just going to continue to do that really. And to ask the question, how much were these recent floods in Rio Grande do Sul influenced by climate change? And how does that fit into the wider global picture? So to get straight to the point, there was a recent rapid response scientific study that was done by a team at Klimameter. And they asked this exact question: how did climate change contribute to these recent floods in southern Brazil? And particularly, they looked at how climate change influenced the rainfall that fell between the 30th of April and the 2nd of May in this region. So what they did was to look at all the storms in this region between 1979 and 2024. And they looked at all the storms that were similar in nature to the recent storm of the end of May, end of April, beginning of May. Then they separated this set of events into what they called the past, which was 1979 to 2001, and the present, which was 2001 to 2024. So now they've got two sets of storms, one for the past and one for the present, which seem very, very similar in their characteristics. Then they can compare them and see if the rainfall has changed between the past and the present. So they did that. And this map down on the left shows their results, where green colours here mean that the present day ones are wetter than the past ones. And they found that in general, there's been a 15% increase in the amount of rainfall that storms like this would rain, but not actually over the whole region, more localized over the kind of Porto Alegre and surrounding region, and then in a kind of band across here. So that's kind of an interesting result in terms of the detail, but I think the general result here is that there has been an increasing trend of storms of this nature having more rainfall. They also looked at urban areas in particular. So I won't try and pronounce all these in my terrible Portuguese, but 3 major urban areas, including Porto Alegre. And they found that in each of these, the blue bar here shows that for the recent set of events, there's been more rainfall than in the past set of events. In this case, also about 15% increase. So this study found that this intensification of rainfall associated with this type of storm is primarily due to human-driven climate change rather than natural internal variability of the climate system. So I should say that this is just a very initial study. There will surely be more climate change attribution studies about this event. But this picture of climate change intensifying the rainfall that comes from storms is very consistent with what we know about climate change, and also very consistent with our observations from elsewhere in the world. So to try and next link this to a kind of wider trend in rainfall in southern Brazil, I found a paper which looked at rainfall trends from 1950 to 2010 over the whole of South America. What they did is to look at weather stations which have rain gauges, and then to look at the trends in annual total rainfall and also the trends in very heavy rainfall. So first of all, apologies for the poor image quality. This was a map of the whole of South America that I just zoomed in. This is Porto Alegre around here somewhere. And on the left, we're looking at the trend from 1950 to 2010 in annual rainfall. And in the middle here, we're looking at the very heavy rainfall trend, which is defined as the 99th percentile of rainfall. So you probably can't see very much detail, but basically, if there's a green circle, it means there's an increasing trend over this period. So for the Porto Alegre and surrounding region here, where there's weather stations, you can see that there's been large increasing trends in both annual rainfall and also in the very heavy rainfall here. And comparing this to South America more generally, out of all regions, Southeast South America, which includes southern Brazil, has seen the highest observed percentage increase in both annual mean and very heavy rainfall. So southern Brazil is a real hotspot for increasing rainfall and increasing heavy rainfall. So then the next question is, how do we expect these precipitation extremes to continue to change into the future? And there's a lot of information on this slide, so I'll break it down slowly. But these pictures are showing the change in the annual maximum daily precipitation change. So it's the wettest day of the year, how that's going to change under a warmer climate, where the green colours are showing it's going to get wetter and the brown colours are showing drier. And then I've got three different pictures here corresponding to different amounts of global warming. So on the left, we have the change in precipitation extremes at 1.5 degrees of global warming, where we're nearly there already, really. We're about, I think, 1.3 degrees already. At 2 degrees and at 4 degrees of global warming. So the first thing to say is that over land, these colours are green pretty much everywhere. So everywhere over land, we expect the rainfall extremes to get wetter as we get warmer. And the second thing to say is that as we go from 1.5 degrees to 2 degrees to 4 degrees, you can see that the green colours get darker, which means that these rainfall extremes are continuing to intensify. So the message here really is that as the climate warms, we expect the trends in rainfall extremes, which we've already seen, to continue to intensify, and that this will scale with global warming. So the higher we let global temperatures go, the more and heavier of these rainfall extremes that we'll get. And you can see that this includes this Rio Grande do Sul region here. And then finally, I want to say something also about annual precipitation changes. So that was so I should say also how we make those future projections. When we want to talk about climate change in the future, what we use are climate models, which are computer simulations of the Earth's climate. We don't just use one of those. We use about 40 or 50 of different climate models, all at different modeling centers all around the world. And we collect that information together and ask the question of what it tells us about future climate change. So that previous slide was telling us about rainfall extremes. Here I'm going to show about the annual total rainfall change and how that changes. So again, quite a lot of information here, which I'll break down. First message here is that annual rainfall change is less certain than the change in the rainfall extremes. So what I'm showing here in the colours is the percentage of different climate models that agree on a wetting or a drying trend. So if there's a dark blue colour here, for example, over large parts of Russia, that's showing that 80 to 90% or more of all our different climate models are agreeing that there's going to be an increase in rainfall in the future. In this case, I'm showing the future under an intermediate emissions trend, which is kind of what we're on track for at the moment. Whereas if there's red colours, for example, in South Africa here, that's showing that some agreement among models that there's going to be a drying trend in the future. And where there's white, for example, Australia, that's showing that the climate models have really no agreement on what's going to happen in terms of the annual rainfall. Some models are showing an increase, some models are showing a decrease. But if we look at southern Brazil, you can see actually this is one region where climate models are agreeing that there is going to be increased rainfall in the future. So that's interesting. I think we're not entirely sure why that is. Why does this region have this agreement? And that is a question I'm myself very interested in. And Climate Science Service Partnership for Brazil, which is a collaboration between Brazil and UK scientists, which I think Andy is going to talk a bit more about next. That's one of the questions that we're interested in. But in this context anyway, what we can say is that there's already been a trend of increasing annual rainfall in this region, and it looks like we can expect that to increase in the future. So to summarize, an initial study suggests that human-driven climate change may have caused the rainfall event associated with the recent southern Brazil floods to be about 15% more intense. I wouldn't put too much faith in that exact number because it's just one initial study, but I think the result that climate change has caused the storm associated with these floods to be more intense than it otherwise would have been. I think that is a solid result and it's consistent with our knowledge about climate change. As Marengo said earlier, one reason for that is simply because as the air warms up, it can hold more moisture. And so when you get rainfall, there's then more moisture to come out of the storm. In southern Brazil and also globally, heavy rainfall events are becoming more intense, and we expect this to intensify as the climate warms. And the higher we let global temperatures rise, the less we limit our greenhouse gas emissions, the more severe heavy rainfall events will be. And then also total annual rainfall. This has increased over southern Brazil since 1950, and we expect this to also to continue to increase in this region with global warming. And then just one final point. I've really talked here about the influence of climate change on heavy rainfall, but that is only one element of flood risk. Flood risk also depends on pre-existing soil moisture and river level, as well as exposure and vulnerability of the local population and infrastructure. So thanks very much. That's all I've got, so I'll stop sharing.
Thanks a lot, Rob. I would have several questions already, but you know, very nice. Okay, so let me call our third panelist, who is also from the Met Office of UK, Andrew Hartley. And he will tell us about some recent simulations developed by his group using the state-of-the-art climate models, which are capable of simulating some storms across South America. And well, I will let him to tell us what the predictions for the south of Brazil. Please, Andrew, can you upload your presentation?
Thanks, Carolina. Yep, I can't start my video just yet, though.
Okay, so Emily, okay, nice.
There we go. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so thank you for the introduction, Carolina, and I'll just share my screen. Okay, let me know when you can see that. I presume can you see that?
Yes,
good.
yes, yes.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
So thank you for the introduction, Carolina. My name's Andy Hartley. I'm a climate scientist at the Met Office, and yes, so we work on, in particular, climate impacts, but also on the use of state-of-the-art climate models to understand more about the processes that drive these kind of events. And so some of the work I'll present today is around this kind of high resolution climate modeling. So to build on what Rob showed just now, which is more the kind of the global understanding of precipitation change. This is looking more at the localized details of what might happen in the future in Brazil. So this is work that's done in collaboration, and it's led by Ron Kahana and Kate Halliday at the Met Office. And Rob and Lincoln have been heavily involved in this too, as well as many other partners across the UK and Brazil. Okay, so Rob mentioned that we have this Climate Science for Services partnership in Brazil, which has been running for many years now, and it's centered around kind of understanding of the carbon cycle, improvements in climate modeling and processes of climate modeling. And climate impacts research, and I lead a work package, co-lead a work package with Jose Marengo on climate impacts, and it all feeds into this kind of building science capability, strengthening relationships, and feeding into disaster risk reduction. Okay, so I've got a couple of slides on the event, and this has been well described already by Jose. But just to flag, a couple of our partners in Oxford University produces a nice article from in the conversation recently, analysing the impacts of the event in Rio Grande do Sul, and looking at the potential causes. So if you want to find some more information, please take a look at this. And that's from Marsha, Kayo, and Neil Hart at Oxford. So just to add a little bit to what Jose said about the processes involved in the recent flooding events. So you can see on the plots on the right here that if I can get my laser pen up. So this is the real area of anomaly. These are aggregates of approximately 12th of April to 11th of May for this year, and you can see the red area indicating rainfall rates up to 1,000 millimeters over this period. And you can really see, if you look at the lower level winds, the driving of that moisture that Jose mentioned from the tropical Atlantic all the way through to the extratropics. And what's happened is that's coincided with an area of upper level strong winds, which leads to instability. So this lower level jet that you see here, coupled with this upper level instability, means that you have this conveyor of moisture that's hitting this area of fairly stationary, stable, unstable air, leading to heavy rainfall. And if you look at this plot in particular, this shows you actually the center of this area is a high pressure. So you get the very dry area just less than 1,000 kilometers north, in contrast to the very, very wet area in the southern part of Brazil. So and this is a very common feature for the end of the El Nino, but it's particularly extreme at the end of this El Nino. So I'd urge you again to sort of look a little bit more at the modelling of these kind of features, and in particular, Marsha and Neil Hart in Oxford have been looking at the higher resolution projections that I'll show you shortly, to understand how these features are represented in the higher resolution models, and how the future impacts might change. Okay. Can I go to the next slide? Let me turn my pen off. That might help. Okay, so let's look a little bit more at these high resolution simulations. So in the Met Office, we call them convection permitting model simulations, and in contrast to the global models, which have let's say a more statistical approach to identifying convective rainfall, these high resolution simulations allow the model to resolve the convection processes themselves. So we call them convection permitting, or CPM for short. I won't go into all the details of this, but just to say that we've run a CPM model in the dotted box here, and it's driven by climate model data from our Met Office GCM, and we've run actually 3 simulations of 10 years. So one is a hindcast driven by what we call reanalysis, which is our best guess driven by observations of the historical climate. We have another simulation that's driven by historical climate model, and another simulation which is driven by future climate model. And we can go into the details of that if anybody's interested, but what I'll be showing now is a comparison between the historical, present day, and the future. But actually, I want to just say something a little bit about what benefit we get from these CPM models. So hopefully you can all see this animation. But on the left, you have a regional climate model, which is our quite coarse resolution, non-convection resolving, and on the right is our CPM with our convection permitting high resolution simulations. And you can see that the features on the right are much more realistic. whereas on the left, particularly around the early afternoon, you see these quite large scale, low level rainfall events. So subjectively, these CPMs look much more realistic. And you can see that also when you look at some statistics of these models. So the box on the left shows the time of day of peak precipitation. So you can see that the observations on the far left here show that we have a peak of roughly 9 p.m. to midnight UTC, so obviously -4 hours and more. That gets you to late afternoon, evening. But in the RCM, you can see, and the GCMs, this is the case that rainfall happens much too early in the day, whereas the CPM gives us much more realistic time of day of peak rainfall. And I won't go into it, but it also gives us improved intensity of heavy rainfall events. Okay, and this is all detailed in Kate Halliday's paper published at the end of last year on these on evaluation and the model setup. So please go and have a look at her paper if you'd like to know more on that. So looking at the future projections now, this is a paper that's currently under review in Frontiers in Climate, led by Ron Kahana from the Met Office. And this first slide is really to show that what Rob's essentially told us in the last presentation, that in general, driven by the warmer climate, we see an increase in precipitation. That's not always the case, and in particular, Northeast Brazil is a separate case, which I think we probably could discuss in a different meeting. But if we focus on Southeast Brazil here, so the box that we had in the paper doesn't quite capture the Rio Grande do Sul area, but hopefully you can see it's indicative of that larger area of precipitation increase. So these are the projections on the top row from the CPM, and on the bottom row from the GCM. And you can see generally the pattern of change that you see in the right is fairly consistent between the two. However, when you look at the monthly breakdown, we do see that the CPM in particular, shown by these deep purple bars, projects much bigger increases in May, June precipitation. And that's potentially something to look at in the future. So the story doesn't just end at mean precipitation, though. I think it's important to say that while the frequency of rainfall of rainy days doesn't change in these simulations, the increase in total rainfall comes from an increase in the intensity of rain, and you can see some significant differences when you look at the comparison between the CPM and the GCM. And yeah, I think that's probably a thing for further research to understand actually what the processes that are driving these changes. But the clear message is that the increase in total rainfall in this region is coming from an increase in intensity, and in particular, this statistic shows the extreme rainfall. So it's the total rainfall from the top 1% of rainy days. Okay, and if we summarize all of this information into kind of one bar plot, you can see that actually the CPM and the GCM are quite consistent, which actually does give us more confidence when we look at the GCM projections. So so you can see here the kind of the mix of the wettest days versus the intensity and the frequency of rainfall and the mean, and this kind of summarizes it nicely in the bottom right corner. Okay, and so yeah, in summary, I think the takeaway message here is that we have quite good agreement between the GCM and CPM, at least from the Met Office models, on increases in rainfall in South and Southeast Brazil. There's no signal for a change in the number of rainy days, so but the increase in the totals is all driven by an increase in the intensity. The future work definitely needs to look at the setup that we looked at the start, that has led to the impacts that we've seen in southern Brazil, and understand more in detail the processes and how climate change will interact with those processes. So I'll leave it there, and thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Andy, for this very nice presentation with these results from simulations of several models. Let me call Marcia Barbosa, our last panelist, to talk about a project, a climate emergency program that she's leading in Rio Grande do Sul. Marcia is full professor at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. She has several scientific prizes, and she's member of both Brazilian Academy of Science and the World Academy of Sciences. And until very recently, she was secretary in the Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation. So please, Marcia, tell us about this nice project, this project that you are coordinating. I don't know how much you can tell us, but we are interested in learning some possible solutions.
So thank you for the opportunity of being here. As Carolina mentioned, until May.
Marcia, we cannot see you very well. You can we can see only a part of your face, so you need to go a little bit. Yeah, okay, that's nice. That's great. Yeah, okay. That's now perfect.
Okay. So until May this year, I was in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, coordinating a sector in the Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation that actually is responsible for the network called Climate Network. 400 scientists that have been for many years, saying that we are going to have dry seasons in the north, and we will have floods in the south. Nobody pay attention to climatologists. Sorry, nobody pay attention. So last year, when we have the first flood, we start to put pressure that we could create a program that gives support to the mayors of the city to be prepared for not only for the floods, but for the dry, for all the disasters that are going to be in Brazilian history now on. Unfortunately, the government machinery is slow. And until now, we couldn't have the problem ready. So I returned to Porto Alegre to another project. And when I arrived here, this flood arrived. Immediately, because I have the contacts, I start to call my colleagues and say, we need to design a program to have a better alert and to have resilience. Imagine you, a scientist, if I approach you and say, let's design a program that nobody asked us to do. Okay, that was the challenge, okay, to design something that at that moment, no politicians want to hear about. Anyway, in a couple of days, we had 90 scientists from all the universities of the south of Brazil and some people from other parts of Brazil saying, yes, I want to work for free to design something that we do not know if people will hear us about. Okay, it's absolutely crazy, but is what is going on. Fortunately, the press is giving us a lot of space to show the proposals you have. So we are not bringing all the response. We select things in which we believe our scientific background can help. And there are two main suggestions that are services that need to be built in the south of Brazil. And that I hope if we do it right, other states will copy and paste. We need to have a better alert system. And we need to have a resilience service. In the alert system, we need to create a local climate alert from emergencies in the state that you monitor our stations in water, in land, and you build the data, share it, of course, with CEMADEN, share it with the meteorological system, but also use the strong network that we have of private monitoring in the state, run the models, and have alerts that actually not only reach the politicians, but make sure the politicians have the education, a second service, have education to have the proper response. So we need the system, we need education, but also you need to make sure the infrastructure in the system is up to date. If our bombs, if our wall in Porto Alegre would be operational, we would not have the huge disaster we had. But the bombs were broken, the wall was completely unfunctional, so the system was not being prepared for that. We had the system, but the system had no manutention. So also you need to create some electronic system in which we can make sure things are working. This is for the alert. 3 services: education, climate service, and one for the infrastructure. But then also you have to be resilient. You should understand that we are going to have this change, as all the slides show, frequently. But that will only be a disaster. We are not prepared for it. So we need to rebuild our roads because they were destroyed, our bridges because they were destroyed, our cities in a way in which they are resilient to this change. So we need to create a rebuild resilient process. And this is key at this moment, because at this moment we are receiving funding, federal funding, international funding, local funding, and I'm very much afraid that we are going to do less as we did last year. We built exactly as was built before, and we are going to end up having this disaster in a couple of years again. But also, you need to look to our land. You understand that it's not only cities were destroyed, the land where we plant were destroyed, the hills, they went down. So we need to look to this ecosystem and redesign in order to be more resilient. We have to look to the basins and redesign in order to be more resilient. And the specific answers to each one of the topics, the bases, the cities, the agriculture, how we do with the hilly areas, how we operate all that. So the land use have to be redesigned. And I might say that in the state where I am, actually, some of the environment regulations were relaxed in the last few years. And these helped this disaster to be so strong. So we have to revisit regulations to do that. But also, we need another important key instrument, that's education. So at this moment, one of the groups is just designing classes to be given in every single school of the south of Brazil, talking about climate change, talking to the kids what you do when your house is so flooded that you have to go to the roof. Where you go before that, how the cities prepare for that. So there's a connection between the alert and what the families will do to survive to that, and how we accept that our houses have to be rebuilt in a different way. So when you have the flood, you are prepared for that. So this program is divided in 6 working groups. And I might say, if you are in the south of Brazil and you want to cooperate with this, please call me. You find me very easy. You go to internet, Márcia Barbosa, Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul. You have there my cell phone, and we contact, and I'm receiving, and I'm going, and at the moment, I'm talking about this program to the mayor, to the state government, and to the special cabinet that you have, ministerial cabinet that you have in Rio Grande do Sul. But I understand that the politicians will only do something if you have a strong pressure from the population. Because all these programs I mentioned, they are programs that require long-term investment. It's not like hiring a consultant company that's going to tell you what to do quick, and is it, you solve the problem, you rebuild a couple of houses and go home. No, we are talking about a program that changes the way we educate, the way we live, the way we plant, all the economic, and how we save this beautiful environment of the South of Brazil. And this is a window that's much longer than the 4 years window that usually the politicians live with. So we need pressure that you make finally the politicians to hear what science is telling them. That science is telling them to rebuild the bridges differently, that science is telling them to rebuild the houses differently. And that will require changing of regulations. That will require more money to do that. That will require not planting until the edge of the river, but having a renovation and reforestation of those areas. That also requires that when you replant, you do not use eucalyptus, because part of the hills were devastated. You could see the trees going down, and all those trees were eucalyptus. So we have to rebuild using what the edge of science is telling you to do. And we need to be prepared, because this is not over. We are going to have floods, but also you're going to have dry seasons, and we are going to have cyclones that we just have a couple of years ago. And we have to be resilient. I cannot finish it without telling that this big disaster is also a worldwide disaster. People from the south of Brazil, these poor people that lost everything, they were not the ones who got rich. He got industrialized, emitting CO2. These are, in general, the people that have the lowest possible emission footprint, but they are the ones suffering. So we need also worldwide recognize that you have to put our feet in the brake and stop carbon emission. Will be us, the ones that didn't profit from this super hyper industrialization, who will be the one suffering most. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. So now I have this very, very difficult task to select those very interesting questions that people have been asking. I will try to be very short. I tried to select some, and I will excuse myself to say that it's going to be impossible to ask all the questions. Some of them have been asked, have been responded by our speakers in the chat. But let me try to summarize. So first, Marcia, there are some people who want to help, and then the answer is to contact you, right? Okay, Marcia Barbosa, Marcia.barbosa, @urgs, UFRGS. I can write you can write perhaps, Marcia, in the chat your email, then people they will know. So let me, I would like to group one type of question that that I think is quite important, which are the consequences, the impact of the extreme events in several fronts. So there is Daniela Oliveira, who wants to know about the impact on the biodiversity. Then Camille has said that they are interested in this kind of collaborations because it's a central question. Then there is Daniela Ramos, who is also wanted to know about the impact on the Amazon, and other people asking those type of things. So, and one of the questions is, are the models predicting that? And how can the models do some work on that? So I think that there was Rob and Andy who was responding this. Can some of you, any of you, summarize what you were responding to the people for all of us, perhaps in 2 minutes, Rob or Andy? Can you?
So which questions in particular, Carolina? Just any of the ones that I've responded to?
You were commenting that the whole of the models and climate change. What can they predict some consequences on the biodiversity in the lack of the Amazon, or what can models do in this direction? The impact of the extreme events.
I think Andy was responding to that one, so I'll let you go, Andy.
Okay.
So obviously before we kind of go into the biodiversity implications, we do need to understand the actual temperature and precipitation changes, and the one thing I would say with biodiversity is obviously there's a lot of it in the Amazon, and we do need to record and understand its location, and more about the sensitivity of individual species to let's say climate drivers. That's the first thing. But of course, there is a lot of research going on, in particular around the resilience of the Amazon forest to changes in particularly precipitation and longer periods of drought. And obviously, I think Rob and Jose can elaborate more on that aspect of it. But yeah, that's one of the really big kind of international areas of research at the moment, is to understand how the let's say the forest as a whole will respond to prolonged periods of drought, and in particular, there's a few experiments that we've been involved with as UK scientists collaborating with Brazilian scientists, where we've been looking at what they call through-fall experiments, where they basically have they've covered over the understory of the forest and collected the rainfall, so they don't let any of the rainfall through into the soil, and they've had so it has been led partly through the CSSP Brazil work, and Lucy Rowland at University of Exeter. So this area of forest has been covered for approximately 10 years, and just recently they've removed the covers to look at the response of the trees to one, to the drought over the 10 years, but then to look at the recovery of the trees when you do let rainfall back in. So that's uncovering some really interesting results in itself, and there's lots more great insights that we can get there about the resilience of the forest. It's important to note that's in the eastern part of the Amazon as well, which is the area where we're projected to see some of the biggest reductions in rainfall. The other thing to note is that we're involved in a what we call a free air carbon enrichment project in the middle of the Amazon, where we've basically through collaboration with Brazilian partners, we've constructed these rings around the trees in the forest, and the plan is that we'll pump in carbon dioxide into the air surrounding the trees and monitor the trees' response to the increases in carbon dioxide, and that's really valuable because it can help us learn a little bit more about how trees might respond to periods of drought under higher CO2 levels, and of course, the through-fall experiments are great because they help us look actually physically exclude the rainfall, but that's only really within the current levels of CO2. But if we want to understand the future resilience of the forest, we need to understand how resilient it might be at higher levels of CO2 as well. So there's some really novel and interesting research areas to come there. Shall I hand over to Rob, or
let me just say that we are going to have other panels, so perhaps we can actually talk about the influence, the impact of those, because I think that's a quite important question. It's very broad, actually, as a question. So there are several other questions that I would like to that people are asking, and they are all interesting. Many of them are very interesting. But perhaps I wanted to close with one of them, which is perhaps, I don't know if José Marengo or Marcia can answer to this. But Marcial is asking, does someone have more detail why it appears there was an inadequate maintenance of Porto Alegre's flood defense, given the occurrence of a similar yet smaller flood? Because, in September 2012, I think the question is, in September 2023, there was this huge flood as well in Rio Grande do Sul, but Porto Alegre was not affected. Although it's true that the river has just raised by 1 meter less than now. Why now we had this huge impact and it did not happen in 2003? Marcia or José Marengo, I don't know who could help us with that.
I can help with the answer. You say just 1 meter is 1 meter. It's a lot. It's 2/3 of my height. So I think it's a huge amount. But what failed is that the doors, they didn't support. Some of the doors didn't support the pressure because they're old. You understand? Because this wall was from the 70s, and if you are a person born in the 70s, you might think you are not the same as someone young, and if you didn't have a renovation over the years, you might not support that. But the biggest problem were the bombs. So most of the water was entered by the river through the doors, but also some of the others came from down, so from the pressure. When the bombs were not throwing the water away, we have water entering the middle of the city, like in the place where I live, Menino Deus. In Menino Deus, the water was coming in this way. So renovating these bombs that didn't have a renovation, and actually have documents showing that some of the engineers belonging to the systems of the underground water were telling we need to have these bombs fixed, renovated. We have to keep an eye on that. But the government didn't do that, you understand? And if you want one more, why the local government didn't do that is clear, called neoliberalism. And I think people from UK, you understand what I meant with that. Okay, so it's much better for a mayor or a person from the government of state to put money in something more visible than underground water.
So thanks a lot, Marcia. I need to close this interesting panel. It's sad because there are so excellent questions. Let me just say that our panelists would be happy, I guess, to answer you if you have those questions. There are Marcia who wants help. So if you want to help in this important program in Rio Grande do Sul, please write her. And there are questions about model. If there's one person who said that would like to use some artificial intelligence to predict, then I think perhaps our guest here, our host, Aline, can help with that because she's an expert in data science. So actually, I hope you would the impacts of this panel will happen in the sense that people get together and know each other, and so you can actually make some difference for the future. So thanks a lot for our 4 panelists and all people who were here together, almost 200 people, and thank you for everyone being here today.
Thank you, Carolina, and thank you everybody for your interesting questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. I cannot open my camera anymore, but I thank you for everyone. There were a lot of interesting questions, so it's a pity that you have a short time, but I think some of the questions were we could address. So and actually, time is finite. So I was actually curious with do you have information about the frequency of those extreme events in the south? How frequent they will be? Because they will happen more. But do you know about the frequency? I think this
No,
is
well, so it's not something I can draw on immediately, but it's definitely
okay.
something that we're looking at.
Okay.
But I mean, yeah, I think it's fairly clear from the results that they are more frequent, but sorry, that it's not the increase in frequency, it's the increase in intensity is the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Carolina,
Because I think
yes. Yeah, right. I mean, there is some frequency. I mean, I think that when we said one event in 100 years, it doesn't work anymore. I mean, because the system is not linear, and now you may have events that it happen one in 50 years, now it happening one in 10 or one in 5. So as Andy said, perhaps it's the intensity the most important thing rather than the frequency.
right, but when you say that it's going to happen more often and with more intensity, I think
Not more often. Not
not
more
more
often.
often, more
I didn't say.
intensity that you have said. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So,
It's
but actually, what I want to say is that as the last question that I raised, that Marcia responded was that had this huge floods in 2023. It was huge, but not enough to destroy Porto Alegre. So there is this this nonlinear effect, which when it happens, it can be really a bigger disaster. So somehow the amount of intensity also matters, right?
But also the location of rainfall, because in 2023 it was more on the Taquari river basin, and now it covers also the other rivers, and the other rivers had a lot of water to the Lake Guaiba, and Lake Guaiba flooded in May. I remember I was in Porto Alegre in October, and the Lake Guaiba was flooding some of the shores in there, but they didn't go through the walls, you see. But now it was much rainfall, and they overpassed the flood.
Yeah, there was a huge Jacuí as well who was
Jacuí,
very affected.
the Santas.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think
okay,
this
so
question, sorry, Carolina, have we got to go? Have we got time for one quick follow-up?
Sorry?
It's up to us.
Okay, great. Just this question of intensity and frequency, it's actually not simple really, because as Andy and Jose were saying, that there's not going to be, as far as we know, there's not going to be an increase in the number of storms. But if all the storms have more rainfall, and if we don't increase our flood defenses, then it means that the frequency of floods will increase.
Right, so exactly. Yeah,
the frequency of storms not increasing, but probably the frequency of, if we don't increase our flood defenses, probably frequency of floods increasing.
No, and the worst part about the map that you showed us is that all the increase is going to happen in the continent. That's such a horrible news, you know. It could be more. It could be shared among the oceans and the land, but actually no. Everything is gonna rain on the land, right? Most of the part of the.
So for the very heavy rainfall, and not just in the continent as well, everywhere globally over land, the most intense rainfall is getting more intense.
Yes.
For the question about the kind of annual totals of rainfall, that's a lot more nuanced. In some regions, for the annual totals will get drier. For example, parts of the Amazon, we do expect to get drier in the annual totals. But even there, we expect the extreme rainfall to get more intense. So again, it's not that simple, but
yeah, sure. Yeah, there are a lot of nonlinear effects. Yeah, that's a problem, right? That's a complex system. Okay, so yeah, I have the point is that this panel raises more questions than answers to me, but it's very interesting. Thanks a lot for everyone. I let you leave because otherwise I will keep on asking. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye, people.